Well, welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Baxter Media. I'm Zephan McMillan, Virtual Events Coordinator at Baxter Media, and today is Thursday, September 21st. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please send me a message in the chat, which is located to the right-hand side of the screen there. You'll see the private message area, and you can just send me a private message if you're having any difficulties with the technology here today. Again, you may need to click to allow audio. At the end of the webinar, we may have some time for a short Q&A, so feel free to type your questions into the Q&A section of the public chat. You'll see it there at the top right. Q&A, you can submit your questions there, and we'll hopefully have some time at the end to answer them live after the presentation and the conversation. And please remember that this is a live webinar, so your patience is appreciated during any technical difficulties that may arise. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to all registrants within about 24 hours once it has been processed. We're aiming for about 30 minutes here for the conversation, so a little shorter than our normal webinars, but we're looking forward to this conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Canadian Travel Press Executive Editor Bob Mowat to introduce our speaker today. So Bob, take it away. Thanks.
Welcome everyone to AI Insights, Conversations with the Experts, the first of a series of interview sessions focusing on artificial intelligence and the travel and tourism industry. Euromonitor International is the world's leading provider of global business intelligence, market analysis, and consumer insights. From local to global and tactical to strategic, its research solutions support decisions on how, where, and when to grow your business. It has offices around the world and analysts in over 100 countries. And using the latest data science techniques and market research on every key trend and driver, Euromonitor International helps make sense of global markets. Today, I'm joined by Carolyn Bremner, who is the Senior Head of Travel Research for Euromonitor International, where she manages the global content strategy for the travel and tourism industry. She is a global thought leader, engaging with clients, trade bodies, and research partners, and works with analysts across 100 countries to drive strategic insights. Carolyn has played an integral role in creating the most extensive travel and tourism intelligence system that's used by leading destinations, governments, and travel brands around the world. Carolyn, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Bob, for having me. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation.
Good. We'll get right down to business. Artificial intelligence has been making headlines in the last little while, but it's not new. Lots of companies, like telecommunications companies, for example, have been using it on their websites for a while now. I'm hoping you can put things into context for our audience today. What is AI? Are there different types of AI? And why is AI big news these days?
Well, artificial intelligence is essentially the ability of machines and computers and software to conduct tasks that would normally be associated with humans and humanity. It's a very interesting topic. As you said, it's very prevalent already in our lives. Looking into the history of AI kind of started just after the Second World War with cybernetics, and then they coined the phrase in the 50s. And, many consumers around the world are very familiar with AI, for example, conversing with their smartphones, using Siri or using Alexa. Those are all types of AI. So I think that's a very important issue to note, that, AI covers lots of different areas. So for example, as I mentioned, the virtual assistants, the chatbots that use natural language processing. You've got, other types of AI, which is basically using analytics. So, predictive analytics, machine learning. We've got deep learning with the neural networks, which is where you see the likes of ChatGPT. You've got biometrics. You've got facial recognition, emotion recognition, and of course, going further into the future, you have things like driverless cars and autonomous vehicles. So it's a very, very broad sort of area of information and intelligence.
Now, Euromonitor internationally recently released some new research on the increased use of AI tools by the travel industry. Can you give us an overview of what you found out? Why is the use of AI increasing, and what's driving its growth? And I also understand you might have some new data on AI usage in Canada. If you would like to share that with us today, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. So we conduct a Voice of the Industry survey where we ask travel businesses, how are they engaging with new technologies such as AI? And, basically already last year, we had 33% of travel businesses globally saying that they were adopting and integrating AI into their businesses. Equally, when it comes to consumers, we can see their engagement. So, for example, in Canada, consumers are, using chatbots and, engaging with AI on websites to solve customer queries and, to get certain responses to their questions that they have. So 53% of Canadian consumers are already engaging with some kind of bot online or virtually. However, when you put it in context to Canadian consumers wanting customer service advice, they would rather prefer to talk to a human being directly. So 64% said that was their preferred option. But also, as I mentioned, AI also is in the form of Alexa and these kind of virtual assistants. And already in Canada, 40% of consumers are using virtual assistants like Alexa to find out information such as the weather, find out what the news is, search up products. So it's already in our daily lives.
Well, I think you've made yourself a lot of friends in the Canadian travel advisor community with the message that Canadians want to use a person. So what are travel executives saying about AI? Do they see its usage increasing? What do they see as the benefits of AI? And do you have any intelligence on what those executives see as some of the negatives of AI for the travel industry?
Well, in terms of strategic priorities, it's not the number one priority. That was based on our research from last year, which it was big data and analytics, which I guess feeds into artificial intelligence. And then AI was a priority for about 50% of travel executives. And of course, with the release of ChatGPT in November, there's been this sort of viral wave of interest in large language models, the LLMs, as exemplified by ChatGPT or Bard from Google. And it's really sort of captured the consumer's attention that they can go online, converse, and create new content, images. Students using it for their dissertations. We know that there's a big backlash against that. Obviously, the issue of copyright, plagiarism. But yes, ChatGPT has been sort of already used by billions of people around the world. And it's a very intuitive tool. And obviously, consumers are engaging with it for a variety of different reasons, including trip planning. And of course, itinerary planning, and many of travel brands are always already jumping on the bandwagon with this. But as you mentioned, the negatives, we obviously, there are a couple of very serious negatives with artificial intelligence, as we know, anybody who's watched, A Space Odyssey. But it's not just this sort of singularity in the sentient being. It's also the immediate risks to consumer safety, to data privacy, data sharing, all these questions to do with security online. Equally, you have the timeliness of the information. ChatGPT, the free version, its reference bank is 2 years out of date. We did a test at Euromonitor using it for itinerary planning, and one of the guys here, used Bakhmut in Ukraine, and basically the itinerary trip planning mentioned nothing about the war in Ukraine, the dangers to life. There was nothing about security. So there's this big gap between, the information that you receive, and we all know that there's talk about hallucinations of AI, it's sort of making things up when it doesn't know the right answer. So we have to be very aware, and we have to, there's so many different areas that need to be looked at. And already in Europe, we've got the AI Act, which is where they are, identifying the risk levels of, there's serious risk, there's unacceptable risk, and then there's moderate risk. So already that's like a useful regulation sort of guideline for how, for example, in Europe, they're thinking about AI and how to regulate it.
Now, in the mid-1990s, the internet disrupted or democratized, depending on how you want to look at it, the distribution of travel. How do you see AI impacting on travel distribution? How big a disruptor or democratizer, if you wish, will it be?
Well, as we've seen, the travel industry is highly digitalized, and it goes back to, the 50s with the emergence of the GDS. Then, as you say, the online travel agents, the early noughties, we had Airbnb and the sharing economy. And now we're in this new wave of automation, which has really been sort of accelerated because of these large language models. And so at the moment, the focus is on the sort of search and discovery and inspiration stage of the customer journey, where we're seeing AI coming into play. But that's not to say that ultimately it won't move into the booking realm of the travel journey. So, for example, if we look at the travel brands that are embracing AI, we've got Expedia, they've integrated it into their app. You've got TUI in Europe using ChatGPT to help consumers find the perfect experience when they're on their trip. It's across the board that they're using it. But as I say, it's mainly in the discovery and information stage of the journey. But of course, as with everything, it will become increasingly integrated. And we already know that OpenAI is working, with travel brands such as Booking or Expedia, Airbnb, Skyscanner, TripAdvisor, to work on these plugins that you can have into the model itself. So yes, that it's very, very likely we'll have much more seamlessness between the trip planning and the booking stage, probably in the next couple of years.
Now, travel advisors were certainly impacted by the arrival of the internet. At the time, there was a consensus that retail travel agents would be, and I love this word, they'd be disintermediated. How big of a disruptor will AI be for the retail travel advisor sector of the global travel industry? Do they have a future? And any thoughts on what that future might look like?
Well, if your consumers are already have got access to these open source tools such as ChatGPT and AI online, then of course it makes sense for you also to be using these tools and to leverage them, but to bring in your insight, your experience, your expertise, and provide that very, very important contextual information so that you can give the consumer the best of both worlds, because they are going to be using these tools. And it's up to, the industry to also move with that trend it's been quite a big pivot. For example, I was at ITB Berlin in March, and it was just the hot topic of the day was ChatGPT, blockchain, and metaverse. And so obviously, AI has really captured consumers' attentions as well as business attention. And ultimately, if you look at enterprise-wide software like Microsoft, because obviously Microsoft support OpenAI, then ultimately those software tools are going to incorporate AI. We've got Copilot that's going to be launched very soon by Microsoft, where ChatGPT and the like will be integrated into the Copilot. And so ultimately businesses will have access to this type of tool. And so it's almost like everybody has to sort of, rather than sort of put our head in the sand, just be pragmatic and see how can we use this tool, because ultimately it's here, the genie is out of the bottle, and we need to also provide that unique value add which the bot or ChatGPT or the language model can't provide without that very important human sort of level of experience.
Now, Euromonitor International's research also offered some insights into how the industry was adapting to AI. Can you offer some examples of companies adapting, who they are and what they're doing?
Yes, I mean, with AI, it's traditionally been used for digital marketing to drive personalization. So for marketing campaigns or social media. But what we're now seeing is AI being sort of those language models being integrated into apps such as Expedia. It's being used, for example, such as Airbnb, using it to drive operational efficiencies. It's being used, AI is being used, for example, to create digital twins. So we see smart cities such as Helsinki, using it, or Venice, for example, to help with, over-tourism. I read even, Vancouver Airport creating their own digital twin and to drive efficiencies in terms of sustainability, reducing carbon emissions. And, they were even using it to digitalize their Indigenous art collection. So there's so many different varied ways it can be used. So yeah, it's quite a fascinating subject.
Now, one of the things you mentioned in the research was the phrase ultimate concierge. I'm wondering, what is the ultimate concierge and how long do you see it taking before AI is able to fulfill that role, and maybe why?
Well, the ultimate concierge, I think this is a great question because, ultimately it is a person, a machine, or a combination of both that provides a truly personalized, contextualized, seamless, and the ultimate delivery of customer service. So across the customer journey, before the trip, during the trip, afterwards, if there's any sort of refunds or cancellations that need to be sorted out. And so, there is this sense that the ultimate concierge is with you throughout the whole entire journey. And that's where it's that kind of omni-channel approach that sometimes the machine at the moment or the bot won't be capable of, solving those issues. And actually, if we can hand over those menial and mundane tasks and drive automation at the lower end of the value chain, we can free up staff and people to be delivering a more concierge value type service. Mm-hmm. So there is this sense that there's a trade-off that we can be freed up to deliver that higher value service.
How quickly do you think that's going to arrive?
Great question. I would say, already consumers are so digitally savvy and, they have their smartphones wherever they go. They're using it for inspiration discovery, for booking during the trip. So there's going to be ever more sort of omni-channel and digitalization of the customer journey. But that's not to say that we would then want to remove the experiential element of travel. So I would say that, for a pure sort of AI concierge, we're maybe looking sort of hopefully 10 years out.
So what's the path to AI adoption look like? What are some of the key concerns about its adoption? And you talked a bit about this earlier, and what I've heard mentioned repeatedly is that real-time data is an issue. Maybe you could drill down a little deeper into that.
Yes, so the real-time data and information, for example, in ChatGPT, the free version is 2 years out of date. But then they have this integration with Bing, which makes it more real time.
Right.
And so they are working to resolve that. But then you have to also be paying a monthly subscription for the sort of more premium version of ChatGPT. So there's real-time data. There's also the danger of perpetuating bias. So if the data reference bank is the entire internet, there's obviously a lot of discrimination, hate speech, etc. So we also need to be careful about, ensuring that there is a responsible AI, which they are calling for, that doesn't, perpetuate bias. Equally, I was reading about the carbon footprint of generative AI because it requires much more computer power. It's more complex processes. It sort of is dependent on data centers, large data centers, built in the Arizona desert, that are very carbon intensive and require a lot of cooling. This is another area we need to have the full picture. We need transparency on the carbon footprint of generative AI, because we can't swap one carbon intensive activity like flying for another one. So we have to have all the information to hand. And it does seem like, as I say, the EU AI Act is very much focusing on the use of AI by humans, not necessarily solely on its own, and equally that it is for fair, inclusive, along with that just transition that we need to make to ensure that we reach those sustainable development goals by 2030 and net zero by 2050.
All right, now I've asked you a lot of questions, and I'm wondering if there's a question that I haven't asked you that you think I should have asked you, and if there is, what's the question? And naturally, what's the answer?
Well, of course, the number one question I have is how far can we trust it, and can we trust it ultimately? So, I do feel that we need more information. There needs to be greater transparency, and just generally, it feels that, also governments need to take more of an interest, because, we can't close the stable gate after the horse is bolted. We need to be working with industry now to understand the full impacts on the environment, on society, and equally, ensure that there is this just transition as we sort of move into this accelerated process or period of automation. Obviously there are opportunities such as we can maybe move to a 4-day week. That gives rise to more leisure, blended travel, etc. But that all has to be managed carefully. And also we can't sort of risk, the have and have nots. It's really important that small, medium enterprises also are sort of brought up to speed very quickly with how to leverage AI and use that competitive advantage. Because of course the big tech players are already there, but it needs to be, a level playing field.
this is my last question, and you touched on it too. What about the unintended consequences of AI? How concerned are you about such consequences? And how concerned should the travel industry be about such consequences?
I think we should all take an interest in the topic of artificial intelligence, because it does touch on everybody's lives. There are obviously advantages if we, can look at it pragmatically and see how we can leverage it, because it is everywhere. And obviously, we're expecting more and more digital transformation as we move into the next iteration of the internet. So there's unintended consequences, as I mentioned. We have to ensure it's fair and transparent, that nobody gets left behind, and equally that we are very, aware of the carbon footprint, and equally that, it does work for mankind, and ensure that, we don't get to this stage where it's sort of overtaken us and we don't quite fully understand those impacts. So if we can just, all start being more aware of it now, I think that would be very helpful.
Great answer. Listen, thank you very much for being here. I know that if anybody in the audience is headed to World Travel Mart, Euromonitor International will be there and doing a couple of presentations and whatnot. I hope maybe in the new year, because I understand there's more research, you'll come back and talk to us again. And right now, I'm going to turn you over to Zephan to see if there's any questions from our audience. But thank you, Carolyn. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome.
Excellent. Well, we've got about 2 minutes here on our time. So if we go a couple minutes over just for the Q&A, I think the audience, at least the people who are asking the questions, will be happy about that. And hopefully these are relevant to some others. So I'm just going to ask maybe 2 questions here. So first off, how do we tackle the fear of using AI and with travel? And second part of the question, any AI tools you would recommend? So fear of using AI with travel and tools that you would recommend.
Yeah, we definitely, we need to demystify it. And I think that was actually in the European AI sort of law that they're sort of considering at the moment, that we have to ensure that everybody, knows what it is, just as you've been doing here today. It's very sort of informative, and, let's just take a look at it. What are the pros, the cons, and just have that very open and honest conversation. Equally, as we know, for example, the younger generation are already very familiar with obviously technology, and, they're in games like Roblox and, Fortnite and all these kind of things. And that's the kind of, where the future of the web is going with Web 3.0, with these immersive environments, with artificial intelligence. So we also just have to be, looking at what's coming down the track and ensuring that when we are sort of educating our kids, that when a lot of work has been done on coding, for example, so equally how to leverage AI during those types of computer science activities. And then for the travel industry, there's going to be a very extensive period of upskilling that's going to be required. But for example, travel is one of the most digitally advanced industries that there is. We have 70% of intermediaries are booked online. It's highly digitalized. We have a very skillful and digitally savvy workforce that, this is just part of that evolution in the upskilling and their education. And I feel that the travel industry is incredibly resilient and really is poised to embrace this new technology and to work with it and find how to make it work for them. So that's what I would say on the sort of the importance of upskilling in the industry. And then, of course, there are a variety of different tools out there. As I mentioned, the integration of Copilot into Microsoft means that it's going to be accessible to, businesses who are, working with Microsoft. So that would be something for travel businesses to work with their IT departments to get up to speed about those new developments. And of course, there's some great resources out there. For example, to help me prepare for today's webinar, I was reading around, lots of McKinsey articles, Harvard Business Review, just how to use these technologies. And even actually looking what the global travel brands are doing themselves. So for example, Sabre have been running a hackathon with Google. And equally, if you have a relationship with Google, then that would be something to be explored, work out how can you work with them to drive your AI strategy.
Great. Well, I think those are excellent answers, Carolyn. I think why don't we wrap up the Q&A and keep it shorter so we can stay within our time here. So again, huge thank you to Caroline Bremner from Euromonitor International. Really appreciate your time and your expertise on this topic. So thank you. And thanks, Bob, for your questions as well. We will be sending the webinar recording from today to each of you and anyone who registered for the webinar within about 24 hours after the webinar ends, so you can revisit the conversation. All of our upcoming and past webinar recordings can be found on travelpress.com under the Travel Webcast tab, and you can find them on our YouTube channel as well. I think we should have our social media stuff coming up on the screen here, and you can find us there, and you'll see our YouTube account down at the bottom there, and you can access our past webinar recordings. This one will be there as well within about 24 hours, and you'll get it in an email as well. So don't forget to follow us on social media, folks. We'd love to hear from you as well. And with that, why don't we wrap things up and we'll close it off. So thank you again, Caroline and Bob, and thanks everyone for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Virtual
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.